come to the Glebe today to have a look at a brilliant warm weather method, which is pace fishing. It's responsible for a lot of big match wins throughout the year on a lot of different venues. There's a few things you need to get right with it. So today we're going to have a look at the rigs, the bait and everything you need to get the most from it. Let's go and mix some paste up now. Right, so we're going to have a look at how to mix the paste and the bait that we're going to be using for today. Really simple to prepare. You don't need to overcomplicate things. Many people have different ways of doing it, but this is the way I like to do it. First of all, nice big tub of water. Add it into another bait box. So I've got about a pint of water there, straight in the bait box. Then I've got the ground bait. This is the ground bait I like to use, a special G green. It's a nice fine ground bait, and when you use a nice fine fish meal ground bait, you end up with a nice fine consistency, and you can get exactly how you want it, which is vitally important with pace fishing, as the texture is everything. So unlike most ground bait mixing, I'm going to add the ground bait to the water. So this gives me a smoother mix, so I'm just going to pour that in. Just enough to cover the water initially, and then I'm just going to give it a little stir around, a little bit messy, and that's still like a very watery consistency. So best thing to do, if it's a little bit too wet, just add a tiny bit more, mix it round, and all the time you'll be able to feel the paste thickening up. Now that's gone to like a soupy consistency now. So once I get it to that sort of consistency, the best thing to do is to just totally leave it alone. Let all those particles absorb all the water and revisit it in a minute. While we're here, the feed that we're going to be using, again, really simple. We're just going to use 4mm and 6mm pellets. The pellets, depending on the depth, paste, as you're relying on the fish feeding on a very fine mix, you can get away with feeding quite small pellets in quite deep water. So it sort of goes against the grain of everything else in other forms of either pellet fishing or most forms of pole fishing. So the idea is to get the fish in the peg, get them feeding on this paste mix, and then obviously where the paste is self-regulating all the time, where you're striking out the paste, leaving a little blob of paste in the peg every time, it keeps the peg ticking over. So once you've got the fish there, it's not really a great need to feed a lot of bait, which is quite important. Obviously, when you're feeding though, where you're relying on the fish feeding on the bottom, it's vital that you feed quite a large quantity of bait at once rather than all the time. Otherwise you get lots of silly bites. A lot of people struggle with hitting bites with pace fishing. So by feeding a lot at once, letting the peg settle and fishing over the top of it, you definitely get a lot better response. So we'll let this rest a little while and then we'll come back and revisit it. Right, so we've left this to soak up for only a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, doesn't take long. From the soupy consistency that we left it at, you can see now it's quite a soft putty type consistency, and that gives us a good base to change it around as we need it for the session. So what I like to do is add a bit into a couple of separate tubs, just so I can play around with different consistencies of the fish. A lot of people, they use paste very stiff for the reason that they want it to stay on the hook and not fall off, and to me that's wrong. The best way you want it is you need a nice soft paste. Not only do you get more bites, you definitely hook more fish because the hook flies through the paste nice and easy, and it just generally works a lot better. So what I'll go from there, I separated the two paste mixes, so I just add quite a bit more water to one of them, and this will give me a very wet mix. Now that might seem like it'd be impossible to keep on a hook, but I can assure you it does stay on a hook. And it's very, very good for fishing in either shallower water or for smaller fish. Obviously today we're fishing for a slightly bigger fish, so we might have to wait a bit longer for a bite. For that reason, this paste mix in this soft putty form, which is still a lot softer than a lot of people would use it, to be honest, will be absolutely perfect for what we want today. So there's two different paste mixes there. I might try this one throughout the day. Sometimes literally you can only get a proper bite off a really soft piece of paste, but I'd expect the slightly stiffer version to be a better option. So let's have a look at the rigs we're going to use now. Right, so the bait's mixed up. We're just going to have a quick look at the rigs we're going to use. With paste fishing, extremely simple. Doesn't get any simpler than this as far as the setup goes anyway. We've got an 020 Power Optex mainline. The float itself is a 4x14 DF1. As you can see, it's got a nice long bristle, which helps you read all the bites. You get lots of little silly dibs and dobs when you're paste fishing. So you're looking obviously for a nice positive indication, looking for a couple of really sharp digs on the float, and then it'll fly away. And there, everything else you want to ignore. As you come down the rig, you'll notice that there's no shot on this rig whatsoever, absolutely nothing. And that comes down to an 018 Power Optex hook length. It's a 6-inch hook length with a size 12 B911. It's quite a big hook, but it's not over the top. And quite importantly, as you'll see later on, because there's a bit of weight in the hook, it will keep, when the paste does come off the hook, it's possible to catch a lot of fish with no bait on the hook. So basically the float will pop up, it will sit still, and for about 20 seconds after the bait has come off, it's possible to catch a fish with no bait on the hook. So it's just going to sit there where the hook is heavy. It will sit in the bait still without wafting around and catching on the fish and foul hooking them. So other than that, where the fish are quite a large average size in here, I've got a 12 to 16 TKS twin core elastic. It's quite soft. The fish will swim out the peg no problem. We'll use the puller bung and we'll be able to get them under control quite quickly. The pot's quite important. With most fishing, you want the pot sat very, very close to the end of the pole. When you're paste fishing, you want it sat further back. As we show when we mix the bait up, we're using quite a soft paste. So I want to be able to, these pots are ideal because I can drop a bit of bait in which sits in the bottom half of the pot, and I can just sit with a paste hook bait on the top, ship it out and tip it in. So there's no shipping out and losing the bait on the way out. As far as plumbing the rig goes, it's absolutely vital to get this right. So always use a very heavy plummet. This gives me a true idea of what I'm fishing over. Paste works well in many situations, but where you've got a soft bottom, where you might not fish on most commercials, fishing paste on top of this, where you get a lot of fizzing, a lot of muck coming up off the bottom, it can be a very, very good method, and the only method you can fish on the bottom. So for those sort of situations, it's bang on. Put the plummet on. We're just going to fish a nice short line today. We're not going to fish very far out. So ship the rig out. And where I've got no shot on this rig, I'm just looking to plummet to dead depth to exactly how the float is going to look when I put the bait on. So as you can see there, I've just lowered that down. I can feel a nice, quite a hard donk on the bottom there. So it's a firmish bottom, which means I should be able to get quite a nice presentation and some very clean bites as well. So I'm just having a little feel around here, and where I've plumbed this up, it seems like I'm just a couple of inches short of the bottom of the shelf. So if I push it a little bit further, it's a little bit deeper, which means once I tip it in, it should sit the float down exactly as you see it there, which is exactly how you need it. So Always have it dead depth, plumb it up to how you want it to see it, and you won't go far wrong. Let's catch a fish. Right, so we're going to kick the swim off now. Start with, I'm just going to put a decent handful of 4mm pellets. I've just soaked them up a little bit so they all sink perfectly. So we're just going to ship that out. Got a little bit of a far bank marker, so everything goes in the same place, the feed and the the rig itself. So I'm just going to tip that straight in. And then to start with, because I'm not fed any paste yet, so I'm just going to kick off with a fairly large piece of paste. A lot of people mess around and mould it into silly shapes when they're paste fishing, but the best way, just pick up a decent blob of it, flatten it with your thumb, put the hook in, fold it around, and that is literally it. And I'm just going to sit that in this pot. Now, when you're shipping the rig out, I like to leave a decent length of line between me pole and my float. So basically I can keep this float in the water all the time, and then you avoid all the silly little wrap overs that you get. So we're shipped out to the length we're going to fish. The next thing to do is to just hold the pole out a little bit further and tip the bait in. Pull the float directly over the top of the where you've dropped the bait in, and just let the float settle. As you can see there, the float is exactly how we plumbed it up, and now it's just a case of sitting and waiting for a bite. I'm sure it won't be too long. Oh, there you go. There's another one. That's a typical paste bite, that one. A couple of really sharp digs on the float and straight under. So we've had a little start on this now, and had a fish first drop. Now I've just had this one about 5 minutes later, and it just sort of backs up that paste is quite an instant method, and it can be a great way of starting your match. And this looks like a pretty typical paste fish, that one. There you go. Proper old chunk. Right, there you go. Well, that's a typical paste fish. I won't lift him up because he's a bit lively, but that's a fish probably just about into, well, quite a way into double figures, I'd say. But yeah, so it's been a good start so far. Like I say, it's a typical sort of paste response. A few fish coming straight away to the big pot of bait. So we'll just see how it develops. And hopefully we'll catch a few more. There we go, another one on the paste. We've caught loads today, all different shapes and sizes as you can see. But yeah, it's been a great day, and just goes to show that fishing the paste correctly can be a deadly method on the right day. So get out there and give it a go.